Political ideology. In 2001, Venezuela faced a severe crisis marked by food shortages, lack of health care, and human rights abuses under President Nicolas Maduro. Millions fled the country as economic decline, inflation, and unemployment worsened. The crisis stemmed from decades of economic policies centered on Venezuela's vast oil reserves. While Hugo Chavez's socialist policies initially reduced poverty, economic collapse followed, with critics blaming socialism and supporters citing foreign sanctions. Venezuela's future, however, remains uncertain amid global ideological struggles. As political conflicts between socialism, liberalism, neoliberalism, conservative populism, and religious extremism shape politics worldwide. We will get into some of these political ideologies. Authoritarianism is an ideology that may allow freedoms in non-political life, but it does not permit any political challenge to the ruler. Civil religion is a common religious sentiment, usually promoted by the state, that defines citizens as brothers and sisters and teaches respect for religious differences. Class consciousness is a recognition of one's membership in an economic class, which Marx at one point in time argued can engender a sense of profound camaraderie among the proletariat based on the recognition of common economic conditions. Classical liberalism is an ideology that emphasizes natural rights, limited government, and capitalism. Communism, however, and Marxism is the eventual condition that will emerge from the fall of capitalism, characterized by peace, justice, freedom from repressive laws and political supervision, and equality of material resources in a society without economic classes. Conservative populism is an ideology on the right that calls for winning elections so that the government can regulate media and incorporate elites in order to protect traditional Western culture and what adherents see as ordinary citizens. Cosmopolitanism is the idea that one should define oneself primarily as a citizen of the world and not of any particular nation. Critical race and gender theory is a contemporary movement to expand rights and equity by compensating past victims of injustice through law and public policy in order to achieve a current condition that is judged to be fairer. Democratic liberalism is an ideology that merges elements of classic liberalism, especially its endorsement of capitalism and individual rights, with a high regard for equality of treatment and democratic decision-making through elective representatives. Democratic socialism is a new left movement defined by deep appreciation of socialist ideology and democracy. Dictatorship of the proletariat. In Marxist thought, a contemporary period in which workers would organize, take control of the state, and engage in the cleanup operations necessary to usher in communism. Direct democracy is a system in which the populace decides political matters by direct majority rule. Environmentalism is a movement that aims to preserve and protect the natural environment. Fascism is an ideology that combines reverence for the state with nationalism and anti-communism and skepticism of the parliamentary form of government. First wave feminism is a movement of the 19th and 20th centuries, respectively, to advance women's rights, such as the rights to vote, to enter into contracts, and to work in all professional fields. Fusionism is a political movement combining moderate economic libertarianism and moderate social conservatism. General will is Jean-Jacques Rousseau's term for laws that advance the true good of every person in society. Globalism is an ideology that calls for either enhancing the power of existing global institutions, such as the United Nations, or creating new international bodies with effective governing authority. The harm principle is the idea advanced by J.S. Mill that laws should not restrict the freedom of adults, even if adults exercise their freedom in ways that cause them personal, physical, or moral harm, as long as that exercise does not harm another person. And again, that's the J.S. Mill who backed up Utilitarianism by Jeremy Bentham. Hegemony, the prevailing cultural norms that serve to reinforce the economic domination of the upper class. Indigenism is a movement asserting that indigenous tribal communities have special virtues and deserve to be preserved by the state. Intersectionality is the belief that individuals may have characteristics that make them members of more than one oppressed group, and that these groups intersect, exasperating the oppression that such individuals may experience. Laws of nature, according to Thomas Hobbes, rules based on human reason that would allow people to achieve peace and live free from worries in the state of nature. And now remember, Thomas Hobbes wrote the Leviathan. He disagreed sharply with Rousseau on human nature. And John Stuart Mill was the one who wrote many different works, one called On Liberty. Maoism is the ideology advanced by Mao Zedong that the Chinese peasantry, and not the industrial workers, could and should be the agents ushering in communism, and that the peasants need only be led by a powerful political party. Mercantilist, economic policies that discriminate against other countries' imports and subsidize exports. Multiculturalism is an ideology arguing that all or almost all of the cultures in the world are valid and should be respected, that many individuals deserve a great sense of their identity and self-worth through their membership in a particular culture, and that the state should affirm this diversity of cultures. And so we have many multiculturalist histories now. Nationalism is pride in and celebration of a national identity based on shared blood, history, and soil, usually to the exclusion or detriment of other identities, persons, or cultures. Natural rights, according to John Locke and other thinkers, rights that individuals have as a consequence of the natural law. Nazism is a form of fascism that governs Germany from 1934 to 1945. Neoliberalism is also an ideology, but is in the form of a movement that encourages developing countries to adopt a free market, open their economies to international trade, avoid significant inflation, and enhance the rule of law and the rights of individuals. Political ideologies in general are consciously held ideas about both how political life is structured and how it should be structured. Political secularism is the view that explicitly says that religious sets of principles should not administer government. Second-wave feminism is a form of feminism that emerged in the 1970s and henceforth has focused primarily on bodily freedoms and safety surrounding sex and personal relationships, especially the right to abortion, the right to a divorce without having to show cause, and prevention of domestic violence, as well as critics of pornography. And in social conservatism, a school of political thought that emphasizes the need for the government to uphold traditional moral standards based on the natural law or on the long-standing traditions of a given geographical area, and that is social conservatism. Social contract, according to Thomas Hobbes, is an agreement among the people to give power to an authority that can ensure that everyone follows the laws of nature and can punish those who do not. Social relations of production. Social normalities such as marriage that have been shaped by the capitalist economy. Socialism is an ideology committed to remaking society to ensure more or less equal material wealth, and especially equal possession of the goods that individuals need to reach their full potential. The state of nature is a term used by thinkers such as Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, Rousseau, to describe what they suppose life would be like if there were no government ruling over the people. Structural racism is a form of racism thought to be manifest when actions are taken with a legal, political, and cultural context that has been shaped by the past racist decisions of others, regardless of the individual actor's personal beliefs or intent at the time. Third wave feminism is a form of feminism that argues that society is marked by embedded cultural patriarchy and works to append these patriarchal norms. So third wave feminism is basically eliminating cultural patriarchy and trying to append the patriarchal norms that have been blatant throughout all of human history. And finally, totalitarianism is a political system in which the state seeks to control the totality of its citizens' lives as a means to achieve state objectives. In summation, the classical origins of Western political ideology starts in ancient Greek politics and political philosophy, such as monarchy, aristocracy, tyranny, oligarchy, and democracy. Of course, in ancient Greek, an aristocracy was political ideology that was preferred, and then, of course, democracy and oligarchy and things like that. These Greek political ideologies prioritized concentrating powers in the hands of virtuous rulers while also exploring mixed government systems as alternative models. Concerning the laws of nature and the social contract, Hobbes and Locke developed the concept of the state of nature to evaluate government legitimacy. Hobbes believed an absolute ruler was necessary in order to prevent chaos, while Locke argued for a government that protects natural rights, including property and free markets. Adam Smith would come along later and would expand Locke's ideas to advocate for global free trade, and Rousseau would then introduce the concept of government based on the general will of the people. The development of varieties of liberalism. Classical liberals advocate for individual rights, limited government, and free trade, supporting capitalism as an economic system based on property rights and voluntary labor contracts. Mill, however, would expand on the concept of personal freedom to include all actions that do not harm others, and in response to the Great Depression, some leaders supported greater government regulation of the economy, while other thinkers opposed government planning and supported reduced regulation. Nationalism, communism, fascism, and authoritarianism. Nationalism centered on shared identity through blood, history, and land. It became a dominant ideology in the 19th century, but then often excluded other identities and cultures and nationalities. Marx and Engels criticized nationalism for dividing workers and advocated for a global class revolution in order to overthrow capitalism. However, later Marxists like Lenin and Stalin expanded on those ideas, and in response to communism, European fascist movements emerged, with Nazism promoting extreme nationalism and racial superiority at the top. Of course, both Soviet communism and Nazi fascism were forms of totalitarianism, while moderate authoritarian regimes such as Egypt's have indeed sought to balance political control with limited freedoms. China, on the other hand, has maintained strict communist governance while allowing some economic and religious freedoms. Concerning contemporary democratic liberalism has been the dominant political ideology in industrialized nations and developed countries like North America, Europe, and South Korea, Australia, New Zealand for the past 60 years. It does blend democratic governance, individual rights, protections, and a capitalist economy together. And within that framework of democratic liberalism, the center-left and the center-right represent the main ideological subgroups. Concerning contemporary ideologies further to the political left, since the 1960s, the New Left has emerged as a collection of progressive movements, including environmentalism, feminism, critical race theory, gender theory, democratic socialism, globalism, and indigenous federalism. And unlike communism, these contemporary ideologies and movements further to the political left have supported democratic approaches to societal change. The distinction between the center-left and the new left is increasingly blurred, however, as many new left ideas have become central to mainstream center-left ideology. Then there's contemporary ideologies that are further to the political right. So in the past decade, the new right has emerged, challenging whether the center-right adequately defends traditional cultural normalities. Associated with conservative populism, this movement has gained electoral success in countries like the United States, Hungary, and that of Brazil as well. Political ideologies that reject political ideology, we have scientific socialism, Burkeanism, those by Sir Edmund Burke of the 18th century, and of course religious extremism. And so some major political thinkers reject the concept of political ideology. Marxists, for example, claim their ideas are based on social science rather than philosophy. Conservatives like Edmund Burke and Michael Oakeshott, criticize ideology as being overly abstract. Religious extremists, however, dismiss human reasoning and politics altogether, believing that divine revelation and blind faith provides the ideal societal blueprint. For example, you might find people in that category who are promoting things like theocracies. Think about the Taliban and Islamic radicals in that area. Next, we'll talk about civilis libertas, or civil liberty.